Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please welcome Assistant Secretary of Strategic Development for FDOT, Brad Thoburn.
Good morning. I'm guessing that from my lack of an accent, you can tell it's not the secretary, as your program says it is. There's no Boston accent today, but unfortunately, the secretary couldn't join us. He's been asked to present today to the Senate Transportation Committee on the Infrastructure and Jobs Act. So duty calls, and so I'm here in his place. I'm really pleased to be able to really welcome you for the final day of the FAV Summit. This is the 9th annual Florida Autonomous Vehicle Summit. I know yesterday you had the chance to hear from Laura Kelly and Senator Brandes. I want to thank both of them for their leadership. I know as the host, and also Senator Brandes' longstanding leadership with the FAV Summit. It's a lot of work, and they do a great job. Yesterday we had a conversation about nomenclature and self-driving, kind of the marketing side of it. And it kind of caused me to think. I was looking at the sign, the Florida Automated Vehicles, the name of the summit, and I know there's a difference between automated and autonomous, and we talk a lot about autonomous. So I went, and I was thinking, I went back and, as my brother likes to call it, and perused the inner Google, and to understand a little bit more about the difference between automated and autonomous. And one of the best things I saw was a quote from a Nissan engineer, and he said, a truly autonomous vehicle is one where you ask it to take you to work and it takes you to the beach. And I thought, I kind of get that. I have a 16-year-old daughter. It makes sense. So we all know that Florida is growing rapidly. We recently surpassed 22 residents. We like to say, 22 million residents, 22 million. We like to say that we have 800 a day that we add. I think that's conservative, and I think over the last couple of years we've seen that really is conservative. We also have over 100 million visitors annually, so we're really committed to building a transportation system that meets the current needs of Florida residents, our visitors, and really enhances mobility throughout the state to accommodate this consistent and rapid growth. Our mission is to provide safe transportation system that ensures the mobility of people and goods, enhances economic prosperity, and preserves the quality of our environment and communities. We have our unique nature of the Sunshine State gives us the opportunity to enjoy the outdoors all year. And it also gives us opportunities to efficiently and effectively move people and goods through multiple modes: highways, streets, air, rail, sea, spaceports, transit, and of course our expanding deployment of bike and pedestrian facilities, which given our great weather, we are blessed to be able to enjoy year-round. So when we look at where we're heading in transportation in the state, it's really guided by the Florida Transportation Plan. We've been delivering mobility for over the last 100 years at DOT, and it's changed a great deal. Mobility means different things to each of us because we all have different experiences that lead us to a different definition of mobility. But at the end of the day, it's about getting to work, school, appointments, running errands, and it's part of our daily lives. So at the department, we recognize that our customers throughout the state expect more innovative, safer, cleaner mobility, and various mobility options for the decades to come. They're looking for reliable travel times, seamless mobility, and accessibility that is safe, convenient, and affordable. One of the things I really like about Florida, and something that keeps my job interesting, is the diversity of places in our state. We have a number of dense urban centers that demand multimodal transportation options that supplement the existing roadway network. We have rural areas that have completely different transportation needs altogether. In these areas, transportation supports and stimulates economic growth. It's important to realize that regardless of whether one lives in rural community, suburban, or urban area, transportation provides path to jobs, education, healthcare, and other resources. Sometimes the path just looks different. At the highest level of planning at the department and for the state, the Florida Transportation Plan provides the framework for Florida's transportation system. I always need to remind folks that the FTP is not the DOT's plan. It's actually the state plan for the entire state. And it provides the future, it guides the future by providing direction to all the organizations throughout the state that are involved in planning and managing Florida's transportation system, including statewide, regional, and local partners. We are embracing a vision of how our transportation system needs to meet the changing needs of our state by focusing on interrelated goals of the FTP that are embracing a forward-looking plan to ensure our system is more competitive, resilient, and sustainable. We were looking at safety, security, infrastructure, mobility, accessibility, and equity, economy, communities, and environment. One of the most notable shifts in the latest update of FTP is a change in how we define infrastructure to include technology infrastructure that supports transportation. A lot of the things that you're very familiar with, but it's sort of a paradigm shift in how we think about infrastructure to include connected vehicle infrastructure, broadband, and a variety of other infrastructure investments on the technology side. One that has gained a great deal more attention, you're going to hear about in a minute, is EV technology. And it's been great because I think it's gotten a lot of attention at this summit, and I really appreciate the work that folks like Dennis and Brady and Senator Brandis have done in terms of putting this together and getting some really great content. We have currently, as of in 2020, we had 60,000 registered EVs. That adoption rate is 0.41%. The national average is 1.9%. Now, that sounds like we're not doing great. We're a little behind the curve. It's a little bit skewed by California and some others. At the end of the day, we actually have the second most in sheer numbers. So the market's there and it's growing. So we might think we're behind the curve, but I think there's really some optimism about where we're heading. We're seeing really significant investment by OEMs, and we've looked at, as part of our electric vehicle master plan, we sketched out what was the different adoption rates, conservative through aggressive. Our aggressive model showed 35% adoption by 2040, so that's a significant change. Obviously, that impacts our gas tax revenues. That is the workhorse for our funding our work program. And by 2040, our models show kind of a reduction in gas tax revenues, anywhere from 5.6% to 20%. But as you kind of look out our model, it sort of starts to plateau kind of towards the end of the decade. So all of this is occurring when our growth trajectory and increasing demands on our transportation system are occurring. So obviously there's going to be a conversation going forward about what's the best way to fund transportation. And so that'll be an important policy discussion that will continue. I know it's been part of the conversations throughout this conference. The EV master plan itself is actually something that was generated by legislation that was passed last year, signed by the governor, and it required the department to coordinate, develop, and recommend a master plan for the development of electric vehicle charging station infrastructure along the state highway system. So we completed that plan, and you can access it online. I encourage you to do so. Actually has what we created a story map that's, I think, really useful and kind of interactive that you can learn about the different areas of the state and the needs and opportunities. So the EVMP supports the Florida Transportation Plan by advancing EVs to improve air quality and economic development, all those good things. At the end of the day, we're looking at how can we support short and long-range electric vehicle travel, as well as emergency evacuation, what infrastructure investments can we make, and how do we ensure adequate and reliable infrastructure for EV charging. And at the end of the day, our role is to adapt the state transportation infrastructure to enable the future of electrified mobility. And we look at different ways. It's whether we adapt, facilitate, educate, which is a really important piece of this, or coordinate. So having EV charging stations will help throughout the state are going to help eliminate one major concern of EV adoption, which is range anxiety, obviously. as we look at innovation and development of EV technology, one of the things that we always, in all technologies, think about various new applications. And a good example is maybe something like inductive charging and pavement. And I know some places are experimenting with that. So we're going to be watching that closely. I know it's been in the transit space for a while, and I think some of our expressway authorities are kind of experimenting with it. So, these are the kind of things that I think are exciting, an opportunity to think differently about how we provide infrastructure and how we support mobility in our state. So, lastly, I want to mention that obviously the state, the federal government, Congress passed the Federal Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act, which is technically, I think it's IJA. I mean, I'm having a tough time because it was like we always used to make fun of the names of the different acts and like how did they come up with it until they didn't. And it's like, well, we had the, ICE-T, T21, Safety Lou, MAP 21, FAST Act, and now IJA. So it's going to take a while to get used to. But it is a significant increase in some of our formula programs. In fact, but it is, at the end of the day, an extension of the Federal Transportation Act. I think that's one of the things that when people, the media and others talk about it, they think that this is all brand new money. The reality is it's an extension of our programs in many ways. So some of that money is already kind of in our 5-year work program, and we anticipated the funding, but some of it is new, and we get about $600 million additional per year. There's a $200 million allocation we anticipate about $200 million in formula funds for electric vehicles. We're going to spend a lot of time trying to figure out how do we actually allocate those. It's sort of not our traditional kind of program and traditional infrastructure investment. And all of these are going to take some time to get the guidance. I think the EV program especially is going to take a little bit of time for us to get guidance, not only on the formula side, but on the discretionary, because that $200 million is just the formula. There's sort of an equal amount in terms of competitive grants that we can go after. So, in fact, the Infrastructure Act actually adds 21 new federal discretionary programs of significance, and previously we had about 13. So it's a major expansion. It puts a lot of pressure on USDOT, and it's also kind of a reversal of what we've seen over the past several reauthorizations, which was streamlining and reducing programs and more local and state control. So now we're going to see more federal control. It's going to put the onus on us to develop projects, identify innovative solutions that can compete for that funding, and so that we can ensure that Florida continues to get its share of funding from the Federal Transportation Act. And I really do think that the innovative solutions are going to be the ones that compete really well for those funds. So the conversations here today can start to be part of that foundation for us to be competitive. The last thing I want to mention is Florida's supply chain. Well, I got a couple of items, but one is Florida's supply chain. And I was really pleased yesterday you got the chance to have a panel on port-to-freight mobility. I think one of the great things about the FAV is that the name is misleading. It's not narrowly focused, and that we get to have conversations about agriculture and ports and other things, that urban air mobility and things like that, that I think are going to be, driving mobility in the future, and are really salient to our policy conversations happening right now. But supply chain is front and center on everybody's mind. State of Florida is open. We don't have a supply chain issue. We've been making investments in roads, rail, and seaports. We have 14 deepwater seaports, and the nice thing is we haven't put all our eggs in one basket. So we do have capacity. Since 2019, Governor DeSantis and his administration has allocated more than $873 million to more than 70 Florida seaport projects. We included $250 million in seaport funding to aid recovery from the pandemic. In addition, we invest more than $200 million annually in our freight and rail infrastructure to provide a more reliable intermodal network. So we have what we see as a resilient supply chain. We're working with industry partners to figure out how do we capitalize on that investment because we see, obviously necessity is the mother of innovation, and there's opportunities as it relates to innovation, automation, and supply chain optimization that can put us in a better position to compete for business through our ports and other infrastructure. So one last thing I just want to mention. As you probably saw the other day, the governor announced that he was going to have a 5-month, he's proposing a 5-month gas tax holiday to provide relief to motorists and families. I think one of the things I want to highlight, obviously this will have to go through the legislature for approval during the 2022 session, but I know for folks in the industry it's important to understand that this does not in any way impact the work program. The state's in a really good place financially, and we're able to do this without reducing funding for the work program, which is very positive. I want to again, thank everybody. Hope you enjoyed today's session, and just remember to be safe out there. Buckle up every trip, every time. We're seeing some real challenges in terms of folks not using their seat belts, and we just need to make sure that we're diligent and educate others about the importance. It's part of why we're seeing an increase in fatalities while we're not seeing an increase in accidents. So again, thank everybody, and hope you enjoy the day.
And now, please welcome to the stage Senior Vice President of HNTB, Len Becker.
It is fantastic to be with you this morning, and such a privilege to moderate this panel. Panelists, come on up if you would. And if you enter from stage left, there's bottled water there if you want to pick one up on your way. We want our panelists to be well hydrated so they can share their expertise with us today. Our panel discussion this morning is going to focus on the pivot to electrification. If you've been listening intently as I have, one of the main takeaways you're going to have from this year's summit is that the future of mobility is electric. And I'm really excited about the diversity of the types of businesses that are on our panel this morning and what you're going to learn from them in terms of that pivot to electrification. You can tell, right? Our country's and our industry's commitment to electrification. You look at the Biden administration and their goal of 50% of vehicle sales in 2030 being electric. Major automakers have made the pivot to electric vehicles, with General Motors focused on being fully EV by 2035. BMW wants 50% of their fleet to be electric by 2030. And Honda striving toward 40% of their vehicle fleet in North America being electric by 2030. We're also seeing transit vehicles and freight vehicles transition to electric. And obviously, micromobility has been a leader in electrification from the very infancy of the services that they provide. Looking forward to our panel this morning. I'm going to start off by asking each one of you to introduce yourselves. Tell us about your company, and then tell us about the role that you're playing in our pivot to electrification. Dean, we'll start with you.
Great. Good morning. How is everybody? First of all, I want to thank the Florida Automated Vehicle Summit for having us down here. I mean, I remember coming here in 2015, 2016, when this was just kicking off, and the expansion and the growth with the leadership from Senator Brandes and the innovation in Florida has been amazing. So hats off. And we'll talk about Florida and why it leads in innovation in just a minute. But a little bit about Hitachi. Hitachi is, unlike most of these companies here, a really old company. I mean, I could go back to the roots before World War I. And we can leverage our 375,000 employees and 872 different business units within Hitachi to look at our IT and OT experience. But we've made a huge commitment into ESG standards. And that's the reason I joined Hitachi. I'm part of the Global Social Innovations business. Our whole goal is to look at the impact of your carbon footprint on the environment. So I joined and they said, hey, Dean, take a look at how you can drive business, how you can make money, while at the same time be good for the environment and have a good social impact. And it was such a wide berth to say, all right, so we can look at e-mobility, EV as a service. What about decarbonization in your data centers and your manufacturing plants? What about data optimization? So it was a very innovative start, and it is only growing. So we obviously, from our bigger background, we can provide lots of power from the utilities to the charging stations. We can provide 1 megawatt and up infrastructure if you need to. That's what we do at our core. But we also understand it's all about policy. It's about counseling. It's about consulting services. It's about these innovative companies that drive the micro-mobility, they drive personal mobility, they have charging infrastructure, they have mobile charger, and you're going to hear about it in just a second. We understand it's an ecosystem. It's a community event, it's an ecosystem of partners, and it's innovative companies that are going to drive ESG goals and drive the reduction in carbon footprint for Americans. So I'm super excited to be here with everybody.
Thank you, Dean. Joshua, tell us a little about you and your company.
Awesome. So, hello everyone. My name is Josh Aviv. I'm the founder and CEO of SparkCharge. At SparkCharge, we're really approaching electrification a little bit differently. We believe that the electric vehicle owner should be able to have range delivered to them without having to go find, sit, and wait at a charging station. We developed the world's first portable modular DC fast charging station that can be delivered to an electric vehicle owner anytime and anywhere they wanted. But we realized we really had to take a step forward. It wasn't really about innovating and creating this really cool piece of technology if EV owners didn't have access to it. So we created the world's first mobile charging app called Currently, where an electric vehicle owner can select how much range they want, choose the time, choose the location, and then pay all in one app. Meaning that an electric vehicle owner could be sitting at home, sitting at work, sitting outside Starbucks, take their phone out, and with the push of a button, have range delivered to their car instantly. Meaning that now the barriers around where, when, and how someone charged their car were almost immediately removed. And as we've gone and we've seen and we've charged these cars, we're really excited that we're about to cross over the 100,000 mark in terms of miles delivered, and we're super excited to be here today to talk about mobile charging and mobile charging innovation.
Thank you, Joshua. Michael, tell us about ChargePoint.
Good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing? Good? Glad to be here. Super excited to be a part of this panel. And I wanted to start out with something that I've always wanted to say. I was having dinner with the senator last night. I've never started a sentence that way, so it sounded cool. And I love what he's done. I think what's happening in Florida is really powerful, and what is being enabled by both this event, but broadly progressive thinking around where we go and how transportation evolves is really exciting. So you're all a part of that. Congratulations and best of luck. We hope to help you along the journey. A little bit about ChargePoint. ChargePoint, as we were joking in the preamble, we're a 14-year-old company and a 5-year-old business. So we started in Silicon Valley a number of years ago, and we're started by a set of folks that came from the networking industry, so computer networking. And then as the mayor of Cupertino, the founder was given an electric vehicle, and he thought, boy, this is great, but I'm going to need to charge at home when I get to the office, maybe when I'm around town and I'm going to the mall, and it's really a network that I need. It's really an experience that I need that crosses across all of these different places that I travel in my day-to-day life. And so started the company with that in mind. So of course we make charging stations, and we make charging stations that go in your home, your workplace, here at the hotel, in the depot for a fleet of vehicles, in a bus terminal, all of those kinds of places. But at the core of what we do is really is software. We're a tech company building cloud software that enables the network to operate. So much like Joshua was saying, the hardware is interesting, right? Getting a charge is really important, but finding it, seeing it, understanding it. If you're the hotel, you want to know who's charging there, how often. Set your prices that make sense for the audience that you have. And it will be multi-use. You might have fleet vehicles that use it, passengers, drivers that are staying at the hotel, all kinds of things. So we've built a company that is now, a few years old. We went public earlier this year. The largest charging company in the world. We have about 130,000 charging stations. We've electrified 3 billion miles of travel and saved about 500,000 metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions through our drivers. So really excited about the impact we've made so far, and we'll get into all the impacts going forward, but we are in the first inning with the first pitch basically just delivered, right? We're on the beginning of an incredible journey, which literally in the last 6 months has picked up pace like we can't imagine. So excited to be with you here today, tell you the story, and hopefully have some dialogue around what needs to happen. And I would say ecosystem was Dean's word. It's going to come back to that. It's going to take all of us. We all have to work together.
Terrific. Thank you, Michael. Albert, tell us about you and your role at Tesla.
Thanks, Len, and thanks to the organizers for having me, in particular Senator Brandes. Also want to thank you for your role in creating this forum and over the years for taking such a long view on these issues, whether it's renewable energy, AV policy, electrification, and it's really embodied in this forum here. So thanks for having me. So I am the East Coast lead for the public policy and business development team at Tesla, and I've worked in Florida for a number of years across all those products and policies. And we are an electric vehicle manufacturer. We're also a manufacturer of renewable energy products, solar energy storage, and charging infrastructure. And Florida has been a fantastic market for us over the years, and really has been an engine of growth in large part because of conversations like the ones happening here around how to facilitate the transition to electrification, or at the very least make a pathway for electrification to compete, for electric vehicles to compete. And that's what we love to do. That's what we set out to do, to prove that electric vehicles are every bit as good or better than a gas car in every way. So very happy to be here talking about what the role of public policy is in that process.
Outstanding. Thank you, Albert. Colin, tell us about you and your company.
Great. My name's Colin Roach. I'm CEO of SwiftMile, and I'd also like to start out and thank Senator Brandes for inviting us here, and it's also a great honor to meet many folks here. It's a real refreshing group to be with. It's almost like a think tank. I kind of feel as so many good sidebar conversations taking place in the hallways and whatnot. But SwiftMile, what we do is we build mobility hubs for light electric vehicles. So think of it anything under a car. These are the explosion of electric bikes and scooters you've seen, shared and also private owned. You're seeing these sidewalk delivery drones that are starting to proliferate. And then also you're seeing this sort of rapid rise of sort of instantaneous delivery of goods. That's your GoPuffs and things like that, even DoorDash, where the primary choice of these, especially in dense cities, is a bike, an electric bike, or it's a scooter. It doesn't make sense to deliver 4 bags of Skittles, a big gulp, and a frozen pizza, driving a big 2,000-pound car in a city where you got to double park. So aside from that, you're also seeing, just especially with COVID, this tremendous tailwind that it's given to ownership of people going out and buying electric bikes and different vehicles, and also just using the shared vehicles that are out there. They were the ultimate social distancing kind of mode of travel, and people were more reluctant to get into confined spaces like like trains, trams, buses, and all that. So what we do is we work with cities, and kind of an easy way to think of us is think of us as like a 21st century gas station for these vehicles. We work with cities and say, if you give us space in the street furniture zone or the public right of way, we'll set our stations up. It's universal. It works with pretty much most modes of these type vehicles. And if they give us access to power, then we'll set our stations up free of charge to the city. And then we have a digital out-of-home screen where we could stream transit data also to support public transit, which I think is a key piece of the ecosystem, where we could show anything within a 5-minute walk, and this is through a partnership with Transit Screen, a bus ride, a train, a ferry, all that different information. And what it does, especially in today's world, as we're seeing, everything's been basically turned upside down, it creates a really good amenity for the city at a time when simply just not prepared for it. No one really could have anticipated how quick things are going to happen with all these different vehicles. And so, our goal and sort of our mission with this whole thing, our name is Swift Mile. The whole idea is go the last mile swiftly. I thought it was a clever idea back in 2015 when we were thinking of this. But now more than ever, especially with climate change and cities looking for ways to build kind of these really healthy ecosystems to encourage people to maybe get out of riding an internal combustion engine driven vehicle, I think the timing's great. So I think the electrification of all things, whether it be the cars and or these type vehicles, the time's right. It's exciting future.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you all. What a fantastic cross-section of a panel, isn't it? Excited about our conversation today. And we've already heard some themes. Ecosystem, right? That was the theme that started first thing yesterday morning, and you guys are carrying it through. It is truly an ecosystem. Also heard a lot of conversation about partnership, right? Private-to-private partnership, private-public partnership. It's going to be all those relationships that are necessary to drive mobility and this pivot to electrification. But with this group, I'm excited to learn two things. Where do they see the near-term successes, and then what is the long-term vision? So let's start near-term. If each one of you could please share where you see near-term successes in mobility electrification, and also what has to happen to achieve those successes. We'll turn the tables. Colin, are you ready for us to start with you?
Put me in, Coach.
All right, we'll start at that end and we'll work this way.
Yeah, so, this has by far been the most interesting last 2 years, I think, for anybody. But specific to this particular space that we're playing in, at least I am for micromobility, things that took a long time to even get to a decision or be considered at the city level, it's been thrown out the window. Old rules are being torn up, new ones are being written, kind of happening in real time. And, we're seeing, I'll give you a specific example. In Pittsburgh, we're part of what's called the Pittsburgh Mobility Collective. It's a mashup of ourselves and Waze and Spin, which is owned by Ford, and a number of other companies that went in as sort of this collective to offer this great mobility solution from A to Z. And we, our thing is we always need access to power, and we literally had the Pittsburgh utility come in there and lift up a light pole to allow us to plug in and then put the light pole down. Now, that would have taken forever back in the day. And so for us, we're kind of seeing that. I mean, that's a short-term success that's actually happening now. But one thing I'm seeing, because we're in touch with most major cities out there, there's a real desire to really want to make this mode shift for all things electrification. And I just for me, I just see this sort of this sea change happening before our eyes. I was telling I have two daughters, 16 and 18. I'm like, it's not too often you get to be on the front lines of like a major, a change in society, and mobility is obviously one of the three, top things that's part of living. So I kind of, for me, I see the success is really is the mind shift and really thinking outside the box and being willing to experiment and try things at a pretty rapid pace.
Colin, I was really intrigued about your partnership with Shell Oil or Shell Energy Company. Would you share with the crowd a little bit? I know that's a right now success. Share a little bit about that partnership.
Yeah, so we early days when we started our company in 2015, I used to always joke, we're like a gas station, but for these vehicles, light electric vehicles. And so we got to know the folks at Shell quite well, and this is more specific to Europe, where we have a partnership where we're branding our stuff all of our stations, which we have about like 2,000 of our charge points for these vehicles out there. But in Europe, we're starting to grow pretty rapidly. We're partnering with Shell Energy there, where we're branding these Shell Recharge. They're doing a big push, obviously, to get into electric vehicles. And we're branding them, and we're putting them on the gas stations themselves, because in Europe, a lot of the stations there are kind of in the inner cities. But we're also taking them off-site, and we're putting them in places like parking centers, because what's happening now is a lot of people are driving into cities but parking on the outskirts, where it's the parking's cheaper. And then they could get on a smaller device and then come into the inner city. And then we're tying it together also with promoting it via the digital screen, where it incentivizes them to either park in one of the Shell branded stations and they get a discount, or they could get some like 2-for-1 coffee at the retail centers there. But the key for us, and I think it was a really big kind of a like sort of mind shift there, is, you know, here's a large oil company, energy company out there that's really taking this stuff seriously. And I don't think that would have ever been even a consideration, you know, five plus years ago. So we're really excited about it. I think it says a lot, not just for us, but also the kind of the world at large for how quickly things are changing.
Thank you. Another example, right, of the commitment to the pivot to electrification, and to see those unique partnerships, right, that Shell Energy and charging companies are working together to provide mobility options and really energy options. It's fantastic. Albert, tell us about where you see the near-term successes and what has to happen to drive that forward.
Well, I totally agree that the mind shift is the thing that we're in the middle of right now, and anything that helps that. You know, we tend to think about the barriers to adoption of electric vehicles. There's been a lot of research into that. But education and awareness from whether it's the public sector or utilities, local governments as well, just about the availability of charging infrastructure that's already there, but also the commitment to put more charging infrastructure in the ground as quickly as possible. And we've seen that here in the state of Florida. It goes a long way. It cannot be underestimated what a major psychological hurdle that can be to somebody who's considering an electric vehicle for the first time. And it, you know, I can speak from experience, but I hear this universally from folks, that it ends up being much less of an issue than it is imagined to be before owning an electric vehicle. So what can we all do to make sure that there is a high level of awareness of what's already there, and you know, take conspicuous steps to show that, you know, you will be able to charge where you park, whether it's where you live, where you work, you know, very soon or now, because that is often the biggest thing. Price is another big one. That's taking care of itself as manufacturing scales. The other thing I'll mention is, you know, over the last 20 years, really, the way that we buy things has changed significantly. The way that we buy everything, with the role of the internet and e-commerce, people are very comfortable, and a lot of people prefer that process and the easy availability of information as a consumer in that buying process. I think that the way that cars are sold is changing as well, and the emergence of electric vehicles is happening at the same time that process is happening in the auto retailing industry. So there are going to be some interesting challenges related to the way vehicles are sold, where the financial incentives lie. This is a technology that is going to bring less revenue over time in the service and scheduled maintenance department. There was a study that came out earlier this year from Argonne National Lab that showed just in terms of scheduled maintenance, for every $1 that a gas car driver spends, an EV driver is going to spend 61 cents. So for a business model that's very highly dependent on service, and maintenance as a source of revenue. How is that going to evolve? And I think a lot of I'm talking about the franchise system in particular. How is that going to evolve in a way that ensures that franchise dealers can exist and thrive while undergoing this transition to electric vehicles, and also feel bought in and invested in the success of this technology? So that, I think, is a very near-term challenge that's critical to the success of EVs.
Great perspective. Thank you so much. Michael, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so just out of curiosity, how many folks drive an EV today? A handful of hands, okay. Because I think some of the stuff that you were talking about, Al, is relevant, right? So I've driven an EV for about 3 years, 3.5 years. I've charged in the wild 6 times. So in the wild would be not at my home and not at my office. And so the fun, and Tesla, I mean, first of all, we should thank Tesla for creating the business model and proving you could build a beautiful car that people loved and then put a charging network together that enabled all of this to be proven to people. But after you buy an electric vehicle, range anxiety kind of isn't a thing anymore, right? And I think this, we've said paradigm shift a couple of times, and I hate to reuse it, but there's the shift. You don't go to fuel. You fuel where you are. And where you are most of the time, unfortunately, is work or home. Home's great. So one of those two places, and so in fact, when we look at it, 92% of the fuel goes into a vehicle from one of those two locations, which means 8% of the time you're going to, a fuel and convenience place to get charging along the way, supercharger sites, locations that we've put together in a variety of, with our amenity providers from 7-Eleven to Wawa to others. So those are locations that are important from a visibility perspective, but not from a usability perspective. The bulk of the time, I leave the house every day with 240 miles of range. I don't have a problem, right? And so I think that shift is really significant. And so what excites me in the near term is that Tesla's proven electric vehicles can work and they can be a great experience and it's better than things you've had before. Nobody drives a Tesla and says, I want to go back to my combustion engine vehicle. It just never happens. And so that's proven. And now, maybe not your favorite part of this, there's a bunch of other vehicles coming out that will give a bunch of different choices to customers at different price points with different option packages. And so the passenger car choice will increase, and which makes more zealots for electrification, right? Once you drive electric, going back doesn't make any sense, and you get the understanding that you charge where you are, you don't go to charge. And so I think that as we increase the numbers of folks that drive electric and the accessibility to all income levels, we're going to be in a really great spot. And what is now rapidly increasing in pace will only accelerate after there's more experience out there and more enablement. So I think the thing I lament is that people look at it and say, as non-EV drivers, well, I don't see any chargers out there. Well, I get in the Tesla and I see the chargers that are out there. If I get into any other vehicle, I can look at my ChargePoint app, see all the chargers that are out there, see if they're available, see what price I would be charged for it. Other people's chargers, not just ours, anybody's, right? We want to make that experience seamless and easy. So the fact that there's not a huge sign at the exit that says charging station here shouldn't deter you, because your journey starts either on your phone or in your dash, and that journey is secured. There are charging stations out there in number that can provide for comfort in your journey. So I think what I'm excited about is that shift is happening quickly. There are more drivers that are more excited. They're spreading the word, and increasingly that experience will enable the next generation, which we'll talk about later, but will get even more exciting.
And I just want to say that all the other EVs coming out of the market, it is my favorite part of it, because
Yeah, good.
what's more fun than competition, you know?
Yeah, there we go.
Thank you, Michael. And you touched on some really important things there. And I want to recognize the Florida Department of Transportation, their great work on their EV infrastructure master plan. Again, back to partnerships, right? How do the infrastructure providers, right, that are going to help you all get the infrastructure you need to place your tech, right, so that users can go get the charges that they need to address the range anxiety, their mobility needs. It's really going to take that ecosystem, and really appreciate everyone in this room who is participating and contributing to that. Joshua, your thoughts on near-term successes and what has to happen to achieve those?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting concept, and hearing what both you guys said about electrification and charging at home, our data shows something different, right? The people who use our app, the electric vehicle owners that use our app, actually don't have guaranteed charging where they live and where they work. And if you think about it, that's really easy to understand when you understand that most people live in an apartment complex, condo, townhome, high-rise. Not everyone, lives in the quintessential ad that you might see on like Tesla's website with like 2 power walls, 2 freshly cleaned Teslas, 2-car garage, white picket fence, $1 million home. It's beautiful, but it's really not the reality for most Americans today. And that's one of the things that we've seen in the industry is that even if people, live in apartment complexes that have a charging station, a lot of times that's a low speed level 2 charging station. If they get more than 2 EV owners and there's 1 pole, that means the apartment complex or location now needs to understand, do I install another pole or do I, not get a return on investment on the first one? The moment 5 EV owners show up, now do I have to block off 5 spaces? Or can it just be delivered when the EV owner wants it? And we found that that use case is growing rapidly, where essentially, people are really interested in wanting to get into an electric vehicle. They're really excited about owning an electric vehicle, but in a lot of cases, they don't have that infrastructure in place to support that, right? And I think the notion that, just buy the car and you can have it installed at your home. One of the things that we did as an executive team was we had all our executives own an electric vehicle and say, rip out the charging station in your home, right? Our COO, myself, our team, we ripped out the charging stations in our home because we wanted to know what it was like to live without the charging station, which is what a lot of Americans today experience. And what we realized was that if you don't have that charging station at home and then you don't want to pay that high cost, we're based in Boston, everything's expensive. But if you don't want to pay that high cost, then what's your other option? Now, if we all own Teslas, you have to go and sit at the supercharger, right? So that means when I leave work, I'm deviating from my route, I'm sitting at the supercharger, and then I'm going home. Well, now that means I have to do that on a routine basis. And so that takes away from the experience of owning an electric vehicle. And so when we think about, where we are now and like where we're going, one of the things that we realize is that, and as you alluded to, we need to make EV charging accessible for everyone. I don't think we should take it from the standpoint that, you're going to have this charging station at your home or office, because I think what we're going to start seeing is a lot of pushback from homes, offices, apartments, condos, complexes, where they say the ROI just doesn't make sense for us to put 10 charging stations in this garage, not knowing how many times people are going to show up, if they're going to show up, and especially in dense communities, hey, this parking spot is very valuable. I can't just leave it hoping that an EV owner shows up. And when people move in and when people move out, do they own an electric vehicle, do they not? That's going to really create this peak and flow of, am I going to get an ROI on that investment? And so, what we've seen is, mobile charging for us in the short term has kind of alleviated that fear, right? It's alleviated that goal. One of the things that we're really proud of is working with OEMs to the point where when an EV owner comes into the dealership and they're ready to buy the car, the question of where, when, and how do I charge my electric vehicle goes out the window. A car dealership, a salesman can say, pull out your phone, push a button, and now the range comes to you. You don't need to worry about an installation. You don't need to worry about finding a charging station. As you said, now it's on your phone, it's in the car. And I think that creates a much more sustainable and equitable future for electric vehicle owners going forward. And I love the way you described it. We're in kind of like that first quarter, and it's really excited to see, how we'll go to the second, third, and fourth quarter moving forward.
Yeah, we'll talk about second, third, and fourth quarter or the rest of the 9 innings here in just a little bit. But it is interesting to talk about that ecosystem, right? And as we think about what the needs are, I mean, based on what you're facing today and what we're going to hear from you about the future, clearly there's going to be some fixed charging. There's going to be a need for mobile charging. We got to think about our micro-mobility vehicles. It's going to take that ecosystem to really be successful as we pivot to electrification. Dean, what are your thoughts in your term?
Yeah, so it's really inspiring to hear everybody talk about their innovations, and that's why I love my job. I literally get out of bed in the morning, my wife goes, "Why are you jumping around and why are you so excited?" I spend all week talking to innovative companies in this space, and I think that's one of the successes, that this need, this drive towards electrification, this drive towards connected vehicles, autonomous vehicles, has sparked innovation that is just amazing. And we get to talk to these companies, and we get to figure out how can we use these ecosystems and how can we solve these problems. So that's one. Shout out to Florida, and I'm going to shout out to Florida Polytechnic because I was a professor there once, and USF and UCF, all the public institutions that are generating all these institutes and all these research projects to advance the science. Not only are they producing world-class students for our companies, but they're also innovating in this space. So that's a great win in the short run. I also think Florida as a state shows a great win. If you look at the city of Orlando, they've committed to do electric buses, and we're going to talk about fleets. That's one of my challenges. But they said, all right, we're going to get 1 electric bus, then we're going to go to 3 electric buses and take a look and see what the infrastructure needs are, what their charging needs. Then they're going to go to 8, and now they've committed to go to 150 electric buses as the impact on carbon footprint becomes more and more of a focus. And the innovation that Orlando and the state of Florida is awe-inspiring, and so we support that. Challenges, how do we continue to do this? I think if you look at the number of Amazon, FedEx, UPS, USPS vehicles in your neighborhoods, and I'm sure you saw them, the fleet transition to EVs is going to have a huge impact on the grid. And so we need to really take a look at, as the USPS is committed to doing 500,000 vehicles that are EV, and as FedEx and Amazon commits to using Rivian buses or Rivian vehicles, what is the impact on the infrastructure? Are we ready? Can we support this? So I think there needs to be a couple things that needs to happen. One, do you understand what the impact on the grid? Is there a study? Is there a plan in place? You can't just plop down a bunch of last mile delivery vehicles and hope that there's no blackouts. Two, you need to have the infrastructure to support it. And then I think the last part, and it's really, really important to me, it hits home to me, is that there can't be have and have-nots, right? So you can't just electrify Orlando and then forget about the rural areas that need these electric vehicles. They need electric transportation. They need last mile delivery. So I think we as companies and we as innovators and the public institutions need to think about how can I support all of the citizens, both in the cities and rural. But it's really exciting. It's really innovative.
Yeah, and just quickly, just to that point, we're all in this together. I'm rooting for Joshua. He's rooting for Al. We're all, like, it's early innings, as we've already said, but there will be use cases that we can't imagine yet. And the idea that, mobile charging is going to be different than fixed charging, and I need to win, and he needs to, like, we're not in that. There are going to be 1,000 use cases we haven't thought about yet. And fleet is a great example. Like, just the ecosystem required for fleet. You have to get the utility infrastructure to the site. You have to have charging. You want to know where those vehicles are. What's their state of charge? When are they returning to the depot? What's the route miles they have to do tomorrow? How do you do the energy management at night so that you're spending the least amount of money to fuel all those vehicles? And how do you interoperate that with the utility to make sure that that cooperates with their rates, is integrated in a way that we don't have blackouts, all of those things. So it gets wider and wider and wider, and there's room for a lot of folks.
Right, and that goes back to making a business case to help the environment. So you need all those variables. You need that data collected, and you need to know, if you're buying 3 vehicles, do you need 3 chargers? No. Well, what is the rate of charge? I know ChargePoint does a great job with their software as far as how do you optimize that? How do you optimize which vehicle gets charged? And what is the impact on your business to make a total cost of ownership case for electric vehicles. So it's really neat.
What a privilege to have this panel together, right? What amazing insight from people that are making electrification happen. So, as leaders, I'm really looking forward to getting your thoughts on how you see the future, right? Where is the future of mobility as we pivot to electrification? Colin, we'll start with you. What are you excited about? Where do you see the future?
Yeah, well, a little back history of where we came from, and I think where we're headed. If you look at the specific, like, shared bikes, this would be your kind of typical, dock-based bike share system. Between the years 2010 and 2016, there was 88 million trips taken, which is a hell of a lot of trips. In 2019 alone, there was 140 million trips taken. So and that was the last real data prior to COVID. So you're seeing this explosion of things, and it's all for the many reasons we talked about here. Everything's on your phone. It's very easy to access these things. I think with adding the electrical component to a bike and or scooter, people realize it's not just for fun. It's actually a transportation network. You're looking at these dense cities that are growing and getting larger, and people are realizing, wait, I can ride a bike and not sweat? I mean, it sort of sounds trivial, but it's actually how we started. As a matter of fact, Tesla and ChargePoint were our two first customers in the Bay Area, and the way we started is we pitched an electric bike sharing system for commuters. And the whole idea was, you could still be dressed for work and not have to come into work and shower. It was a pretty easy kind of a thought, and we were fortunate to convince, work with both of them. And we thought it'd be really cool too, big charging companies and big EV companies and a tiny little one, and we put our stuff on put a flag on their campuses. But it was great because it was big support. But now going forward, look at the generations. This is very generational, right? So quick story, my daughter's 18, she goes to San Diego State. And here's the life of an 18-year-old, other than getting to sleep in and just not have really many worries in the world. If they want to get around other than walking, they rent a bike or a scooter. I think Bird's on their campus. If they want to go a little further, obviously they take an Uber or Lyft. If they want to use a car for the weekend to go to a beach, they rent like a zip car, an electric zip car. If they want to get home, then unfortunately they use Dad's credit card to use the Uber to get to the airport to buy the ticket to fly home. Both, that's a different story. But the whole concept is they're not really owning many things. And if they do, when they do and they get a little older, they're going to own an electric vehicle. I mean, and we all know that, particularly for that generation, because a lot of the regular combustion engines are being phased out. And so here you have this sort of group that's young and already's adopted this. It's already in their mindset. There's no convincing them. It's already happening. And then you also then drill down to kind of our world where, okay, if I'm in a big city, then I could use these things to get around. Then that creates this whole kind of layered mode of transit that really we're not necessarily using all today. I mean, I can't claim I use these all day long, but there's a generation that's about to. And so, like, where I see it going, and where I truly hope is, you will be somewhat shocked if you go to a large corporation. There's not some really cool sharing system for bikes or trikes or scooters or whatever that you could go the short distance. And the same goes for cities. It's just the multimodal options. It's up and down the spectrum. And the moment's really happening now, and so that's where I see it all going. And charging's a pivotal part of the whole thing, electrification of these things, and that's why it's great to hear all these other stories about how everybody's addressing these different pieces of it.
Yeah, I really have to emphasize the generational impact on the generational shift. I mean, how many kids today don't even have a driver's license? I mean, when I turned 16, the first thing I wanted to get was a driver's license. And the thought of going into a shared mobility and not having a car when I was away, it was foreign to me. It was part of my DNA. I think you're right. There's a shift now that, hey, they understand that there's electrification coming, there's micro-mobility options, they have an impact, that there is a shift from my generation to the current generation. It's inspiring.
Yeah, so we can just go random now? Good. I like it. I think so, too. Cars always meant to me freedom. Right? Like, I can just go. But frankly, I have all the freedom in the world now, and I took an Uber from the airport, right? Like, I borrowed a bike, so I get excited about the freedom that is now available without necessarily the ownership that's always been there. And then if you just play the tape forward for a minute, and you add autonomous to this environment, that Uber ride that I think was $30 from the airport, in an autonomous world, when Uber and Lyft and the others are delivering services that way, that $30 ride is $3. It's 10%. So then you start thinking, okay, do I take a flight to Miami, or do I just get in a sleeper car and take a $40 cruise to Miami, right? Or if I'm going out in the city and it's a $50 Uber ride, it's now a $5 Uber ride. Why on earth would I drive? And then I think I get really excited about the integration, right? So there's a bike available. I can get charging, mobile charging. I'm going to go from a train to a bus to a bike or a scooter. When all of that gets integrated and the journeys are easily manageable, I think it gets really exciting. The kids will reimagine the future for us, so I think we're paying close attention to them. So I think the other thing I would just say, so all of that's out there, but the other thing that's happened in the last sort of 9 months-ish is the financial world's woken up, and there's now infrastructure funds looking to participate, be a part of this from prestigious banks and others. And they're paying attention to the companies that have sustainability in their ethos and in their plan. They will not invest in companies that do not have a plan around sustainability and exhibit that every day. And I would just say this. If you, as a simple example, all the employees want to participate in the sustainability of the company. They don't know how. They can't fix the supply chain. They can't go do these other things. If you put in a charging station at the office, they're 6 times more likely to buy an electric vehicle. So you've now enabled them to participate in that journey. And basically for the price of a cup of coffee per year, about $500 that you would otherwise provide them, they get a $2,000 raise by not having to spend money on gas. They might get to use an HOV lane depending on your location, and they participate in that sustainability journey. So the really simple things we can do will enable better quality of life for our employees, and frankly, lower cost of living in full implementation for a lot of folks. Underserved communities, those with a 2-car garage and a power wall, and everybody in between.
Great perspective. Thank you, Michael. Albert, your thoughts on the future?
I was thinking about how important, I loved your example of taking the chargers out of your homes to really experience what the challenges are there, and I think that's so important. I was thinking about the evolution of electrical outlets in hotel rooms over the last 15, 20 years, and they've sort of migrated from behind the bed to the side of the bed, and then now, shout out to this hotel, which had multiple outlets and a USB port in the base of the light on the side of the bed. But that's a very easy fix since the emergence of smartphones as a ubiquitous thing that needs to always be charged. A longer term, much more challenging, potentially costly transition is multi-unit dwellings. The case that you cited of folks who do not live in single-family homes with a garage where it's fairly easy to install a level 2 charger, and we will not succeed in this transition if we're replacing the gas station model with DC fast chargers. And the electrical grid is going to be severely challenged by that as well. This works best when folks are able to charge where they park, particularly where they park at night, where there's excess capacity in the system. And so how do we do that, taking a long view, multiple decades out, by impacting the buildings that are being built right now? And a number of cities have adopted building codes that build in EV readiness, which can reduce the cost of putting in charging in the future. It doesn't mandate charging, but mandates that you're putting in conduit, that you're building, with sufficient panel space and a vault box that's big enough to accommodate an additional transformer. So it can bring the cost of future charging installation down by a factor of 10 per space. And that is really significant for landlords and for tenants, or condo owners, whatever it may be, but folks who are not in the white picket fence, suburban home, but want to buy an EV, as we're all focused on continuing to bring the cost down. And there's going to be a really robust secondary market. They're starting to be now. And so that's a longer term challenge that really needs a lot of attention right now in order to start having an impact when it needs to. So Atlanta is a city that adopted this building code a couple years ago. Miami adopted a building code last year that does this. So we do a lot of work in that regard, and I'm excited about the impact that's going to have for decades to come.
Thank you, Albert. Appreciate that practical experience and thoughts around the future. We need to be ready, and it's going to take those partnerships and the entire ecosystem to be mobilized to do that. Joshua, your thoughts on the future?
Yeah, so we're really excited about the future of electrification. I think everyone on this stage is. One of the things that we've realized is that 90% of the people in this room who didn't raise your hand, the future is you, right? The future is converting you to an electric vehicle owner. And that's something that, as you said, is going to take all of us together. One of the things that we're starting to see, with our platform is the ease of use and the convenience playing a really big factor in whether or not someone fully utilizes their electric vehicle, right? I love the way the example that you said about, owning a car was freedom. For me, growing up in Texas, I got my driver's license at 16 and I hauled ass. I was gone. My driving instructor told me I had a lead foot from the beginning. And so, but when we think about it, that freedom of being able to go anywhere, do anything in that car, I feel like that's the freedom that we really need to bring to electric vehicles, and I think that's what we're all working towards. One of the things that we're starting to see now that we're excited to really grow and see happening more in the future is in relation to fleets. We're running programs now where we're having a fleet of 25, 50 cars in California and a fleet manager in New York City, and he's able to charge every single car with the push of a button on his phone while being on the other side of the country, right? He's able to now add that freedom to that charge, freedom to that vehicle. No matter where he is in the world, that vehicle can be charged without him ever having to be there. And that's something that's really innovative. And when we think about that and we grow that out, not only from that fleet, but also as we kind of look into seeing how workplaces, rideshare companies, micromobility companies use electric vehicles, we're really excited to see the future take off, where now an Uber driver can essentially have range delivered to him while he's on his lunch break without ever having to deviate from his route. We're really excited to see, a fleet company that wants to allow their employees to take a vehicle home now doesn't have to worry about whether or not that employee has charging at their apartment, their house, their condo. They can schedule range to come every night at 10 p.m., charge that employee up without ever needing to worry about that employee waking up without a full charge in the next morning. Those are some of the things that we're starting to see now and that we're starting to experience now, and we're really excited to really move that forward and get it ingrained so that it's become part of the daily routine for electric vehicle owners and for these companies looking to electrify. But really, like I said in the beginning, the exciting part is getting 90% of the people in this room who didn't raise their hand, having them raise their hand next year or the year after saying, I now own an electric vehicle, and the experience of owning an electric vehicle, the experience of charging that vehicle has become seamless, it's become easy, and it's become enjoyable.
Yeah, I'm gonna emphasize what I just heard you say is really important, because I have a bunch of solution architects. My team is super smart and very supportive, but we always say challenge, opportunity, solution. And there's lots of challenges to the adoption, the mass adoption of electric vehicles. So let's look at a couple of them. Battery technology. We talked about range anxiety, which is a new one. I'm losing sleep over range anxiety. New battery technologies, new innovative lithium-ion batteries, maybe steady-state batteries, vanadium redox batteries. Maybe you go to a model where you do battery swaps. Maybe you lease the battery as part of owning the vehicle. And that raises the bar for these technological innovations. What about service stations? How are you going to service your car? Well, one, Tesla showed us that there's not as much maintenance in an electric vehicle, but you still need to maintain your car. How is that going to be transformed? What about all these gas stations that are going to become electric? That's a challenge. Solution, it is a roadmap. It is a long journey. A lot of people, I say, oh, Dean, we're not going to do this because, you know, you got gas stations at every corner. What are you going to do overnight? Have charge point at every single gas station? No, it's a journey, but you have these innovative companies that are saying, how do I put chargers out there on the road? How do I make chargers convenient so you don't have to pull off on the sideway and find a Walmart that's got a charging station? No, they will become ubiquitous. So there are challenges, but each one of those challenges becomes an opportunity for a business, for you entrepreneurs out there to say, okay, I understand the challenge. How can we overcome it? What about air travel? Is air travel going to be electric in the future? Well, there's a lot of carbon footprint on other forms of mobility. So again, and I heard you say it was amazing. Challenge, opportunity, solution, and the innovation is there.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point about, you know, where we're going in the future and like where we're at now. One of the things that we kind of realized too, one of our partners is Shell. So we partnered with them on how do you make electric vehicle service and maintenance easy, right? So when you think about it right now, Shell is a really big oil company or energy company. They're a really big energy company. Right, careful, yeah, we got a really big energy company. But they realized that the way that they did business 5 years ago is different. The way that they're going to do, the way they did business 10 years ago and the way they're going to do business a year from now is going to be 100% different as the growth of electric vehicles starts hitting the road, right? And so how do you service a car? How do you charge a car? And we really had to sit down and think about, you know, with them about, okay, well, what does an electric vehicle owner want when they come into a service station, right? So when someone shows up to a Jiffy Lube, typically they're asking for an oil change, they're asking for some maintenance, maybe some wiper fluid. But an electric vehicle, you know, a Tesla doesn't need that much maintenance. It doesn't have a working motor, right? But what are the other services that you can offer them? And, you know, we realized that there is going to be this big market of these legacy auto service companies or legacy automotive companies that are going to change from, well, I'm no longer going to change your oil, but I'll still put your tires on. I'll rotate your brakes. I'll change your calipers. I'll do your washer fluid. Oh, and by the way, you know, while your car is up on the rafters, I'm going to be charging it at the same time, right? So when you pull off the rafter and I put the new set of tires on, when you came in the, you know, when you came in the facility, you had 100 miles, but when you left out after I changed your tires and brakes and wiper fluid, you're leaving out with 150, 200 miles as a courtesy, right? We're going to start seeing these really innovative charging options and solutions for electric vehicle owners, and I think that's something that's really exciting to see in the future as well.
Yeah, real quick on that, this is my Tesla model. Why I want a Tesla is that when you buy your car, it gets better every time with the software downloads. The car is, you no longer buy a car and it depreciates. I bought a 2013 and now it's 2021. It's 7 or 8 years old. Well, the software on electric vehicles makes your car better and better. So it's really innovative.
Yeah, so just one quick thing to play on your point. As we think about, right, we're going to go to 50% electrification, then we're going to get to 100% electrification. We're going from 2.6% to 100% over, call it a 30 or 40 year period, right? It's going to be dramatic. We're going to have substantial change, and we're all going to have to learn the new paradigm and understand it and digest it. But a fundamental that will change over time, but not as significantly as everyone thinks. If you don't own an electric vehicle, the first thing you ask is, how long does it take you to charge? Well, I wake up every morning, I've got a full charge. It charged overnight. It takes me about 2 seconds to unplug it, plug it in, and walk away. So the car sits and charges. However, for that set of journeys that we take that are twice a year, 3 times a year, whatever the case might be, that are long journeys, the charging experience en route, highway fast charging, is probably 22 minutes on average. And when you fuel your gas tank, it's about 4 minutes. So in 4 minutes, you can pick out some beef jerky and some lifesavers and get back in your vehicle and get on the road. In 22 minutes, you're going to watch a movie in your car, play a game in your car, or have something else to go do. So what we're working with amenity providers on, and we'd love anybody who wants to reimagine the charging experience of the future in the room. We'd love to have that conversation, because we think if it's 20 minutes and you can plan your journey to say, I've got 2 kids in the back, they're screaming and yelling, I got to get them out of the car, I got to have a place for them to play. I've got a dog, I got to take them for a walk. I need to eat a meal between here and Miami, so where am I going to stop? I really need a coffee because I'm driving through the night. All of those are elements of deciding where you stop and charge. And through your dash or through your phone, you want to be able to plan your journey with those things in mind. But given that the dwell time is 22 minutes, not 4 minutes, the same set of, the little gas station on the corner in the neighborhood becomes less significant over time. Fast charging with an experience, a lawn to play on, something for the kids to go do, who knows, hit a golf ball, get a massage, whatever the case might be. That's what we need to reimagine, and that's what it will look like 20 years, 30 years from now. And all of us can participate in that. And, the folks on the, in the audience today, I think that's the thing to think about. Like, it's different. It's not just stop in a little cement, corner store and sit there for 20 minutes, but you'll be there long enough that you have things you want to go do, and given the context of your journey, those things will vary. So we want to integrate that into an experience for the driver, because it is all about experience. If it's not better, people won't do it. And so love to reimagine that with the folks in the room.
Outstanding. What great perspective. Some big takeaways from your guys' comments. First of all, that there's going to be mobility options, right? We see a ubiquitous being able to move from modes to what you need very easily. It's going to be integrated, and it's going to be sustainable. And those are all really key elements as we think about that pivot to electrification. So let's talk about what it's going to take to enable that, right? We've heard your long-term vision. Let's talk a little bit about what it's going to take to enable that. So we'd love to get your perspective on policy changes and infrastructure investments that are going to be necessary to move us to that long-term vision for electrification. And Colin, we'll start with you.
Sure. For any community or anybody to really start using micromobility devices, electric bikes and scooters and different shared devices or personal owned ones, the number one thing you have to have is protected bike lanes. I eat my own dog food. I ride an electric bike every single day from my house to my office. It's 5 miles there and back. And when I first started, I'm in the Bay Area, San Carlos Bay Area. I'd go down, I'd ride an El Camino, and it was absolutely terrifying. I was like, who the hell would want to do this? You're riding next to these cars in a busy lane. And then I got smart and I started to cut through the neighborhoods, and I started to see all kinds of cool things. I started to meet my neighbors. I'd stop at a little corner coffee shop. And I really started to go, wow, what a game changer it is. And I'd start asking people, why don't you ride your bike to work? Well, shit, I don't want to get hit by a car. Or I don't want to be terrified. I don't want to show up to work stressed out. And what's really exciting about this whole Build Back Better and all this dollars, boatloads of money coming into things, it's a lot of that is focused on how do we create infrastructure, not just centered around the car, but around a lot of other options out there. And a lot of it's obviously, for EV charging as well. So for me, I think that it's just a proven fact that there's a term we like to use, design is destiny. If you build it, you make it safe, people will use it. And so that's a major thing, and it's happening now, as we speak. So we're super excited about that. The future is bright.
Thank you, Colin. And protecting those that are using those micromobility options and mobility options is extremely important. Albert, your thoughts?
Well, I think this is a forum where we're talking about all of the benefits of electrification as if they're a given, and of course I think they are, but I think that's not taken as a given everywhere. People are invested in the success of electric mobility for many different reasons. I think the most compelling one being because it's better, it works better, and people enjoy it. But some people are motivated by climate change. Some people are motivated by air quality, economic development, by keeping transportation dollars in state, by putting it back into the electrical system here rather than sending it overseas. there are lots of different motivations behind this, but you know, the way that our sort of public policy system is set up in this country generally, it's not super easy for things to change really quickly. Sometimes that's good and really important. Sometimes that can hurt innovation and can make it harder for a technology to succeed, you know, as quickly as it otherwise would. But there's a saying, you know, nothing can stop an idea whose time has come, and I think we're starting to see that here. I think with electric mobility, and this has been a proving ground. Florida really, I think, has been an example of a state that's done a great job of aligning policy with space for innovation. Shout out Senator Brandis for playing a huge role in that. So what can policy do? I think the most important thing is create that space. Don't hold up the way that we do things now because it's the way we do things now, and certainly don't build up legal structures, policy structures around that are really hard to tear down when there's a new compelling model or competing model that comes along. And you know, again, I'll give another shout out to the incumbent industry of auto retailers here in Florida that have not played that role with regard to our direct sales model. And you know, it's been we've seen job growth in the broader auto retailing industry in Florida that's far outpaced the national average over the last decade when Tesla's been here selling direct, because more vitality, more competition, a more dynamic marketplace really does benefit everybody, most of all consumers, but also all the other companies in this space. So, so I think public policy that keeps all that in mind. This is an idea that electric mobility is an idea that's tested now, that people are choosing in large numbers, whether it's vehicles or bikes or scooters or you know, whatever comes in the future. And so so I think holding space for that, there's a really, you know, the internal combustion engine has been around for a long time, and there's a huge web of policies that have built up really to support that way of doing things. So I think the places that are succeeding the fastest, like Florida, are the places that are not letting that hold up deployment of these technologies.
Outstanding. And again, I will reiterate our appreciation to Senator Brandis, agency leaders at the DOT and across this state for what you're doing to create that space. It's very important. And also doing it in a way that's safe and driven by the consumer, right? What the consumer is looking for. Great insight from a company that has plowed some hard ground. So Albert, thanks to Tesla with all you've done with the policy front very early on in our journey to electrification. Michael, your thoughts. What do we need, policy and infrastructure-wise?
Well, I'm going to start with one that's both Joshua and Al have mentioned that I think is tactical but really important. Is 30% of our American citizens live in multifamily dwellings, and multifamily dwellings are hard. You've got a condo owner, you've got an apartment owner, you've got the commercial real estate owner, you've got the association, you've got a million things. So if there's a place to mandate 20, I think Dade County's 20% have to be electrified of the parking spots. Vancouver, I think it's 100% of the spots have to be conduited, is that a word? For electrification. And so I think that's an area that I think is kind of practical and simple that makes a ton of sense. But in general, I would say, and we're going to see this with the infrastructure package, money will flow, and providing, there's a lot of experience out there. And so you guys have been in the business a long time. We've been in the business a long time. We've seen how people charge. We've seen how they drive. We've seen their expectations. The experience is mission critical. We've already talked about how the amenities might surround the charging experience. And so, in effect, the infrastructure bill enables highway fast charging, primarily some other things. So if you're involved in figuring that out, dive in and learn, right? Like, learn from the folks that have been in the business for a while, understand the implications, the amenity providers, the charging providers, the vehicle providers, all of that. There's a lot to learn. It's not all obvious on the front end. As folks that come visit us at our headquarters, they always start out looking for a charger. And by the end, all they're doing is talking about software, because it's all about the connectivity and the experience and all of that. That's not obvious to someone that's not in the space. So I would say immerse yourself in it, digest it, and understand it. And then the last thing I would say is it should be open, right? At the end of the day, when I'm driving along the highway and I need to go somewhere, or I'm parking at a mall and I want to get a charge, I really don't care if it's a ChargePoint charger or somebody else's. I just want the fuel into my vehicle so that I can carry on with the rest of my journey. So the openness of that network, is really important. And I think as the policy rolls out, I think we'll see some of that in there. But I think that's really important. And what that enables is public-private partnership, which is mission critical here. If the site host, the folks who own the property where the charging lives, are not participating in the business, they will not make it successful. It will be an asset that rusts and sits there and does nothing. So public-private partnership is critical. If it's going to be on my property, at my Burger King, or at my McDonald's, or at my Wawa, or wherever it might be, and folks can't see the screen because the sun's too bright in the afternoon, or they're getting out there and it's too hot, it's Florida, right? Well, unless the site host is interested in servicing their customers in a positive way, they're not going to put an awning over it, right? But if they are participating in that, they've got skin in the game, they will do that. And then they can integrate it with their loyalty program and encourage those folks to come in the store and spend some money and do those kinds of things. So the fueling is not where they're going to make money in that model. They're going to make money by having people get a set of services that they can provide. And so the amenity is the value, not the charging. It's just electrons. It's a regulated energy source. That experience is what really matters. And I think the public-private partnership part of that is mission critical.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael. Joshua, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's something that we've kind of really paid, very close attention to. Jordan Nierhoff, who's in the audience here, is our head of policy, and he's been working very closely on some of these things. One of the things that we noticed when we first launched the charging service, we launched it in San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Dallas, Texas. And the question we always got asked was, why do you want to charge EV owners in Texas? Like, they all drive pickups. It's oil country. Like, why Texas? And we realized that the use case and the usage of how someone owned and used an electric vehicle in Texas was a lot different than the way someone would own or use an electric vehicle in LA and San Francisco. Texas, Dallas specifically, was very spread out. Average speed limit was 85 miles per hour. EV owners were charging their cars more often because they were covering more distance and driving faster. And if there's two things that electric vehicles don't like, high speed, long distance. And that was that city in a nutshell. And so when we looked at policy, we realized that if policy was going to do a really good job of servicing EV owners and servicing communities, it really needed to be tailored to that specific community, because that specific community is going to use and adopt electric vehicles a lot different than other communities would. And so as we've been having these conversations, as we've been rolling out and scaling our network, every time that we approach policy, we approach it from the community aspect. What can policy do in this community to help grow electric vehicle adoption, and what can policy do to help service these EV owners? One of the big pledges that we took and pertains to policy was the fact that we were going to hire in the communities that we operated in. We made a mission and a pact as a company that if you're going to improve the community from an environmental standpoint, then you also need to improve the community from an economical standpoint as well. You need to hire in that community and service that community. And one of the things that we realized very early on was that there were a lot of charging deserts in LA, in San Francisco, in Dallas, where EV owners couldn't or wouldn't be serviced because there wasn't infrastructure available. And so we started going out and really chasing down policy to change that. How can we provide EV adoption? How can we provide EV equipment in these communities? And so as we look forward in terms of like what we're looking to get out of policy going forward, is really taking that centric approach to let's use policy to improve the communities where electric vehicle owners need it the most, and let's make sure that policy improves not only the community, but the people who operate in that community with electrification.
Terrific insight. Dean, close us out on this topic.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting topic. I'm going to go two ways here. One is the investments that you've all heard about, the trillions of dollars that are coming down for infrastructure bill. Large portions of that are for electric vehicles and electric vehicle infrastructure. But I don't think, to your point, it's not just a public investment. I think the private industries also need to invest research money into these transportation initiatives to enhance electric vehicles. The second one I don't think we've talked about right now is cybersecurity. If you connect an electric vehicle, even if it's wirelessly and it's induction charging, or you connect it to the grid to charge your vehicle, there's an opportunity for people to do really bad things to the transportation system. So I think there needs to be policy leadership and initiatives to cover what are the requirements to make sure your vehicle is secure when you plug into the grid. Now, obviously, a lot of that is innovation. And then the second part is the insurance piece. How do you insure an electric vehicle? The dynamic is going to change. It's not just automated vehicles. The electric vehicle industry is going to change. Do you insure the performance of the electric vehicle? Are you insuring the battery? What are the policies around that insurance piece that covers the public? So I think I heard a speaker yesterday talk about there are so many things that are right now geared towards ICE vehicles, internal combustion engine vehicles, that need to be readdressed as we move forward in the policy sphere. So a lot to consider.
Great insight. Gentlemen, we are approaching the end of our session, but I'd like to do a quick lightning round, maybe 30 seconds each of you. 3 things that you want our attendees to take away from our panel conversation today. Colin, we'll start with you. 3 takeaways for our attendees.
Yeah, quick stat, 60% of all car trips are less than 3 miles. In the last 2 months, these major shared vehicle providers raised $2 billion. Bird went public. Lime raises $523 million. Tier in Europe raises $200 million. Radbikes raises $150 million. And all these things are all driven because of the fact of people got pushed towards them, mainly because of COVID, and really had a chance to do a test ride on them all. And they're very sticky, and they're all electric. And it's a great, I think, gateway drug to then owning other types of vehicles, such as an electric car. So I think the future's bright. I think we couldn't be at a better crossroads for what we need to do, especially with climate change. And I'm just very appreciative of the panelists and everybody here that's hearing our stories.
Terrific, thank you. Albert.
The main takeaway, I think, is when we're talking about what the role of public policy is and what the experience in Florida can teach us, these technologies here can compete, and when they do compete with the existing technologies, they're winning. And I compare Florida a lot to New York, another state that I work in, that has done a lot to support, encourage, incentivize EV adoption. Yet, we can only have 5 stores in New York State. We've got 17 stores here in the state of Florida. It's our second biggest market, simply because the state has made it easy for companies like ours to do business here and to get out there and compete for people's business. As a result, there are 60% more EVs on the road in Florida than there are in New York State because of that environment. But I think that speaks to the technologies. These are really highly competitive with internal combustion engine vehicles, and when you allow them to get access to consumers alongside the other ones, they win.
Outstanding, thank you. Michael.
Okay, I'll try to do 3. I'll see if I can remember the third one by the time I get there. One, I think we've said it, talking about our daughters and talking about how things are changing. I think channel your inner 13-year-old, right? Like, open your mind to what mobility could be. Don't assume it's going to be the same model. It's very different, and sort of open yourself up to new paradigms, right? That's the first thing, because the starting point's the wrong starting point. The second thing is think big, start small. So again, we're going to go from 2.6% electric vehicles to 100% or ish, 90-something, over the next 30 or 40 years. So the parking lot that's got a handful today will be mostly, if not all, electric in a period of time, in our lifetimes. And so what you start with, first of all, start, right? Do something, right? Get engaged, begin the process, and enabling it. But assume it's going to get really large, and assume it's going to be really significant. So don't do throwaway investments and things that are going to go away. Think about it in a broad way. Think about what, how many users are coming in? How are they charging? What should I charge them? Do I want to rent that opportunity to a fleet at night? Do I want to have, my hotel guests get it for free, but somebody who's a visitor pay a fee? All of that becomes really important because there will be, again, we're early innings. There's going to be a lot more things happening out of it, and we have, the world's got more imagination than we do. And then finally, given that, be really flexible, right? So it comes back to, as Joshua's described, it comes back to the software. If the software enables a bunch of capabilities, and then use cases that we can't imagine today are out there, it's fine. If you hard code or hardwire the solution and don't imagine the fleet use case, the passenger use case, the Uber use case, the Lyft use case, the bus use case, all of that, you're just limiting the capability for what can eventually be the utilization of the model you're enabling. So those three things.
Outstanding. Joshua.
Yeah, so I think, our three things would be, number one, it's going to take all of us, right? It's going to take everyone on this stage. It's going to take you guys in the audience. It's going to take the electric vehicle owners that are here now and the electric vehicles that are coming to really get this to where it needs to be, right? It's not something that one can do. It's really all of us. The second thing is, mobile charging is here, right? And that's something that we're really excited about. We're also really excited to announce that we're actually going to be expanding into Florida. So for all the EV owners here in Florida that are interested in mobile charging, we'll actually be launching an operation here in the next couple of months to service you as EV owners so that you can experience mobile charging and the convenience that comes with it. The third thing is we want to hear from you, right? We're extremely grateful to be here. We really want to thank Senator Brandeis and Jeff for actually allowing us to come to this conference. Both myself and Jordan here, we're excited to talk with you guys after this panel. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your thoughts. Approach us. We're excited to talk about electrification. I know Jordan is just bubbling to talk with all of you about some of the projects that we've got going on. So, we're excited to get to know you guys. We're excited to really convert some of you guys, hopefully, to electric vehicle owners today. But, we're really grateful to be here, and we really want to thank everyone for putting on this event.
Joshua, welcome to Florida. We look forward to you all coming to town.
Thank you.
Dean, close us out.
Sure. So I'll start with an awareness, and I think the awareness is here, and it's growing. Everything you do, most of the things you do, especially in the transportation realm, has a carbon impact. Even electric vehicles produce some type of carbon in the production of the batteries. When you travel on airplanes, you produce a lot of carbon. So I want everybody to raise the awareness, raise the bar that it's not just the state of Florida's responsibility or the city of Orlando or ChargePoint's responsibility or Tesla's. You have a personal responsibility to understand what the impact you're having on the environment is and to help society. The second one would be to the entrepreneurs. You've heard of a lot of innovative technology, and these companies were just started up, except for Hitachi. These companies were just started up. You have opportunities out there to innovate, and it's so exciting. Again, challenge, opportunity, solution. There's lots of opportunities for you to innovate and get in this game. And the last one, I can't leave out the students. If you're a student and you're looking at this and saying, how do I get involved? Well, read. Look at what the companies are doing. Look at the innovations. Get involved in your universities. There's amazing universities across the United States, especially here in Florida, and learn how I can be part of the solution moving forward. Again, thank you very much, and thank you to Florida Automated Vehicle Summit.
I want to thank each one of you for participating. Folks, would you help give them a round of applause for their participation? Great job. Thank you, gentlemen.
And now for our next session, please welcome to the stage the co-chair for Local Motors, John Rogers.
Good morning. Death by talking.
I would invite you all to stand up if you feel like it, stretch your legs, please. It's not meant to embarrass you, but it's meant to get the blood flowing for this next conversation. So I'm Jay Rogers, and I am the co-founder of Local Motors, and I'm going to be joined on stage by two of the most cantankerous and loquacious people in the world. So with that leg stretcher, I'd now invite you all to please relax. Can I get my co-panelists to join me? Olaf, Alan, please. Okay, good morning. Up on stage today is a rare crew and two of my newfound and old-found friends. Please, have a seat. I'll go ahead and join you and sit with you. I showed up to Princeton University as a fresh-faced freshman in 1991, and a friend of mine said to me almost every day for the first 2 months of being on campus, I have the hardest, hard-ass operations management professor of all time. And every night I would get a story about how he was driving this student to talk about automated driving networks. And little did I know that the name Kornhauser would come back to me on stage today. And here he is on the other side. Ladies and gentlemen, after 50 years at Princeton University, he is still driving the smart driving network, and you are lucky to have him here to opine. And with us in between is the youngest graduate of this group from Princeton University. Oh, Alan is a professor there. Olaf Sakers. He joins us by way of originally South Africa. Alan was born in France, and I was born in Dallas, Texas. So we're here to talk about, I guess the colloquial phrase is in the room where it happens, but really this is just in the room where we throw out all of the different things that can happen in the world of automated vehicles. So you have a futurist and researcher on the other end, and you have an investor and thought leader here and recent author, and you have the founder of a next generation original equipment manufacturer right here. And lots of other things in between. So I'm going to go ahead and throw it over for some introductions to my panelists, and I'll round it off, and then we'll chat. So Alan, starting with you.
Well, I'm so pleased to be here, and thank you again to Senator Brandes for making this happen. I think I was at the first one, and the last conference that I attended was 2 years ago here, and was on the stage, so I'm so happy to be back to a live conference. It's very good, and here to discuss to move. I think the previous session was really good on electric vehicles. I think we would want to move it and take a look at automated vehicles and have some comments to make about where that's going, where that is, and where it maybe should go.
It's on? Okay, great. I think also you were in an a cappella group at Princeton, so the room where it happens, I hope at the end we're going to get a rendition from Hamilton in the room where it happens. Great, great musical. Yeah, I remember actually doing an event, what was it, 5 or 6 years ago with you, and it was a group of people. Everybody was thinking about autonomous vehicles at the time. I'm an investor in transportation startups, and we were thinking about autonomous vehicles back then. And we brought Kornhauser to the discussion, and he was very adamant that nobody had done a trip in an autonomous vehicle without a driver in it, pointing out that this technology just wasn't really mature yet. And I think that's been the challenge for the space, that the technology hasn't reached production grade, that it can be scaled and bring the kinds of transformations that are possible. In the meantime, I think what's really exciting from an investment perspective is everything else that autonomous vehicles will enable are starting to happen in all sorts of different ways. Vehicles that are right-sized or right-purposed, a transition that's accelerated towards electric vehicles. So there's a whole shift in innovation that's happening in many different ways, driven by the trip economy, trips that come to you, going to places in Uber, micromobility. So we're in this world of the kind of corrections that autonomous vehicles can enable, but it's happening not through autonomous vehicles, not at least yet, but in all sorts of other ways. I don't know if that was a helpful introduction.
Oh no, so helpful. Okay, so I'm struck by the fact that the three of us know so little about this industry, and yet we think we know so much. And so I think we'd like to give you a little bit more from each of our points of view. I'll tell you a little bit about my journey. I, like Olaf, served in the military. And on my last deployment in Iraq, 2 of my friends were killed in doing patrols where we were in the southern 250 miles of Iraq. And I was motivated to make better vehicles. So for me, that was part of the journey. Now, it also happened that my grandfather was the founder of the Indian Motorcycle Company. And so that was a unique failure in automotive history. Great brand, and I think you'll often find that it's the great brands that are the failures that you remember. And Jay Leno talks about it, a lot of other people do, and so I was deeply scared of going out and starting an automotive company, just lest I repeat my grandfather's history. And the chances are you're gonna fail. And I think we all heard yesterday from Alex Royce yesterday that, I mean, if you look at the different maps and the different choke points on the risk board, he left us with this cliffhanger of, okay, what are the choke points? And how are we gonna win? And who's gonna win? Because it was pretty clear that Otis might not have won, and that those of us who go out to either bet on it or research it or do it might get it wrong. So that's why I say that we know so little, and yet we have learned a lot along the way. And in starting Local Motors, for me, I went out and I decided we were gonna learn how to make vehicles through 3D printing. And it took us 7 years to get to the world's first 3D printed vehicle. And I say 3D printed like industrially printed, and it still took us 40 hours to print a vehicle. And then it was another 7 years for us to crash test it, to beat Mercedes in a full frontal crash test, and to deliver our first level 4 autonomous vehicle, Ollie, which is now deployed in 27 locations. And sounds impressive, except for the fact that autonomous vehicle adoption is still much slower than I would like to see it. And so that's where the state of the state is for me today at Local Motors. And so I'd like to throw out a question here, and we will encourage you all to ask questions also. Alan, you have seen more than either of us the ups and downs of where we have wanted to go in better transportation. And so you get the first opinion today on how you feel in 2021 about where we're going to be in 5 years.
Where have I been? I guess that's kind of important. I wanted to go to Mars. All my degrees are in aerospace engineering. I was at the launch down here for Apollo 11, watched it from the beach. Then we got there and that market died instantly. And that's when I was out trying to get my first teaching job. I think I got the only aerospace engineering assistant professorship in 1971 that was filled at the University of Minnesota. And I realized that I had to pivot. It was a pivot almost as big as going from the internal combustion engine to the EV, because we weren't going to Mars. And all of a sudden I found some folks who said, my goodness, we can use all this software technology to go to the moon and Mars to move people around in cities. Automated transportation in cities. And I said, wow, why not? It's called personal rapid transit. I mean, I carried those 2 tablets of personal rapid transit through the desert for 40 years. We built 3 of them in the world. Great idea. But it required the infrastructure to be separated so that you didn't run over children and dogs and hit bicyclists. And that infrastructure nut associated with it just made it impossible for automated highway studies that I participated in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And then all of a sudden, DARPA. Oh my goodness. Wow. Let's forget about infrastructure. Let's do it with, I think it was said yesterday, we don't want to ask for anything. We're just going to go sneak out there and whatever already exists, and we're going to put all the intelligence in the vehicle and let it participate and not hurt anybody, and just be able to get people from A to B. And to me, that was, you know, and for a lot of people, you look at who's in this business, most of them went through the DARPA challenges. And I had the most fun in my life leading the Princeton team through the 2005 and 2007 challenges. It was a ball. But the important piece of this is to create a market, an affordable mobility system. And the affordability comes into play because you can use code for the driver as opposed to people. And people cost money. And Uber and Lyft has shown us the great mobility that we can have on demand, whatever, to anybody. The only problem is it's expensive. We could always do that with taxi companies, you know, but you have to pay the driver, and you can't expect them to work for free. So we're back at the nut at which, if we want to provide the mobility and to do it affordably, we have to use code. We can't use people. Or we have to work for free, as we do when we drive ourselves wherever we want to go at a drop's notice in the middle of the night, who knows what, total ubiquitous, whatever and whatever. But somebody living in Trenton who doesn't have access to a car, they have to sit there and only go to the places where New Jersey Transit wishes to take them, when New Jersey Transit can afford to put that mobility out there through enormous subsidies. And when one looks at the mobility that is afforded to those folks, it is so different than the mobility that I have available to me. And when you then think of the Uber Lyft model and say, oh my goodness, if I can put code in there instead of a person, I can maybe provide to them the mobility that they might want. And it was talked about how many times in the last session. You have to start with the community, what they want, what that market wants.
Okay,
and
so
focus on that.
I'm going to interrupt for a second here. We've got the call out, stake in the ground, from the Apollo 11th mission to accessible mobility. So Olaf, you've got a 5-year investment horizon at Red Blue Capital, let's say, for a fund. Maybe it's a little longer, maybe not, I don't know. How do you make money when you're looking at the autonomous vehicle and robotic market and intelligent driving market? How do you make money looking at new companies in the startup phase?
Invest in other things. I mean, that's the short answer for autonomous vehicles, because most of the companies that matter in this space, Waymo, Argo, Aurora, are quite late stage already, have raised a lot of capital, are public, or backed by a large public company, and have vertically integrated most of their technology. I think almost kind of counterproductively. They haven't worked with that many outside vendors. They've built these very vertically integrated software stacks, and are quite proud of their own internal engineering capabilities, have built large teams. Also, they've had access to a lot of capital, so in general, the decisions have been to build in-house rather than to outsource. So there really isn't that much to be done by startups in the space, which is what we invest in, early stage startups. We have invested in lots of companies over the last few years that have in various ways benefited from the growth of the space and do sell into the value chain in various ways. A company called Cognado that does simulation for autonomous vehicles, Phantom Auto, that does remote control teleoperation, and there are lots of use cases and ways to make money. But for the most part, I mean, there's also sensors, radar and LiDAR, those can be supplied in. But for the most part, the ship has sailed on VC investment at early stage autonomous vehicle technology. But that isn't to say that there's nothing to invest in the mobility space. And I was alluding to that earlier. All the things you're describing about these people in Trenton that might want to actually get somewhere, or people who are using services like Lyft and Uber and who can afford that. On the other hand, there are so many different ways in which our current transportation system, as you rightly point out, is completely broken, messed up. I don't think beyond repair, but it's very heavily skewed in all sorts of ways. But what's exciting is there's a shift underway, and it's a shift from the only option is you own a car. And the panelists before were alluding to the shift to some extent, that people used to be super excited to get their driver's licenses, and now they're relatively indifferent. And I think that's related also to the fact that in most cities you just can't get anywhere quickly because there's so much congestion and the roads are clogged up, and so nobody really is excited to drive like they used to be when the roads were more open maybe. But there's this massive shift underway from a model in which you own a car and go everywhere in that car, and that car is like a decathlete. They're second best at every discipline, but on average they're the best. To this model of sprinters and hurdlers and high jumpers and long jumpers, all these specialized use cases, food delivery, package delivery, Uber ride-hailing, micromobility, all these different ways in which a trip that you used to take in a car, and you'd use the car to drive somewhere and park it and then get out and do something, are now being replaced by an e-bike that comes to you and delivers your food to you in the evening. Or in China, Didi is manufacturing a vehicle with BYD that's optimized for the ride-hailing use case with sliding doors and more comfortable seating and electric powertrain. So more and more you're getting these purpose-built vehicles for particular use cases that are optimized using technology to be more efficient. And autonomous vehicles are like the kind of messianic endpoint at the end of this tunnel where you remove the need for labor in this equation, and labor almost becomes free. That's basically the problem right now, is the cost of labor is a big addition to any of these trip economy services. And then you have a massive shift that will happen on a very global scale. The challenge is that technology is taking a long time, but the opportunity is very clear and is already being moved towards through the trip economy model.
So I'm just going to throw in that when I started Local Motors, I was so excited about the ability to be able to get 3D printed vehicles off the ground, and I started to go around to VCs at the time, and this was in 2006 as I was warming up the business case and getting ready to raise money. And these couple of people had come through the market, Mark Tarpening, Martin Eberhard, and they had gone to raise a lot of money, and they hadn't delivered on the promise. And they built this amazing company called Tesla with Gene Berdichevsky and Bernie Tse. And Tesla just rifled through the VC community and really didn't return any money. And then you had Fisker at the same time, and Kleiner Perkins had famously, their partner Ray, had dumped tons of money into the business, and it ended up being a failure. And the federal government put a ton of money behind Fisker also through the Advanced Technology Vehicle Manufacturing Incentive Program. And then SAP's Wunderkind had come out, Shai Agassi, and he had been funded by a huge Israeli investor to come in and build a battery swapping network that we see with NIO today, and you see other things like that. And these companies destroyed the venture capital market for raising money for an OEM. So like, if you say the ship has sailed, the ship sailed in 2007, and it has been a chunky market to raise money for businesses that are actually building an integrated hardware software stack. And so it's
the ships come back to harbor, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. The ship sailed and came back.
Tesla, nobody would say that about Tesla now, right? Yeah. And I think there's a lot of excitement about the opportunity space. You have to tell the right story. And I think this is like the room where it happens idea, right? A lot of the challenge is that being a founder isn't just about building the technology the world needs. It's also about telling a story to investors, which is the story they want to hear, which is completely different in some cases, and that's not, I'm the kind of investor that's trying to correct for that imbalance, but for the most part, you have to be really good at storytelling as well in order to convince them that even though this went wrong and that went wrong, right? And I think that's often the challenge, and your timing has to be good, because if your ship sails at the right time, you've got strong winds, and if you don't, you've got headwinds.
That's exactly right. And so again, we return to Alex's conversation of you can have the right idea and you have it at the wrong time, and it apocryphally shows up as the success story or the failure, when in fact it was just part of a stitch in the quilt of trying to make a project like autonomous vehicle or accessible mobility show up. Okay, so we've got a futurist, and we've got an investor, and we've got a entrepreneur and a business builder here, though we all share some of the same DNA. I'd like to take a poll from the audience, so get your hands ready. Get your hands ready. How many people here have an app on their phone for some kind of mobility other than ordering a car, like ordering a bike, ordering mobility for yourself, not for your food? Okay, got it. So we have roughly 40%. You can put your hands back down. Thank you. And so, so that says that everybody here is in the micromobility world to some extent, or there's a strong contingent of people that are in the micromobility world to some extent.
I think there's some selection bias in the room.
There might be some selection bias in the room. That's true. And so we're all here together trying to convince the rest of the world to change our mobility profile. And so for those of you that are out there, there are all these opportunities in order to be able to move around, but are you sensing some exhaustion when you try to get around? I am. I know that when I move to a city and it's hard to get around, it feels like though my phone is full of apps to get around and I have every single ability to be able to do it, it's still a pain in the ass to get around. So what are we going to do about that? That's a question for both of you.
I think the problem with getting around cities, I just spent a few weeks in LA. I'm a runner, so I was staying downtown. I quickly moved over to Hollywood because there's like nice nature reserves there. But the whole city sucks, and many American cities suck from the perspective of anybody who's walking or cycling. And this was mentioned also in the earlier panel. I think everybody knows it, but why is America so messed up? Why is it so hard to go anywhere other than in a car, right? I mean, there are a few places, Princeton, New Jersey, very nice to walk around, right? Walking from Princeton to Trenton, very difficult.
No way.
Or New York City, very nice. You know, there's public transit, but it's like the exception that proves the rule. And for the most part, there are these freeways. These things, we call them beg buttons. You know, when you get to the pedestrian crossing and you've got 4 lanes of traffic and then 4 lanes of traffic in the other direction, and you're on foot, and you have to press the button and then wait for the lights to change, and then you get to the middle part and the lights have already changed, so you have to wait again. I mean, there's no clearer way that you are a second-class citizen than having to press a beg button at an intersection and seeing that all the car drivers just get to go through and you have to wait. And then you have to wait again even though they go through the whole intersection all at one time. And then there's an incredible distance to get anywhere because there's all the space that's been handed over to cars. Anyway, that's like a whole rant about the challenge of actually getting anywhere on a bike or on foot. I think the cool thing about scooters and e-bikes is they shorten some of the distances that have been built into cities, but there's really a lack of infrastructure. I don't think there's that much pain on the technology side. I think Uber's become a bundle app and everything you want is basically there. And if you want to support, you know, kind of portrayed as evil companies, you can support some independent micromobility operator or something like that. So I think all the things that used to be more friction points in the trip economy have become pretty simple. It's very, like Uber pushes you to order your food delivery as you get into the ride so that it arrives at the same time as you. Like, I think that's super convenient. If you're driving your car, you have to stop and wait and all sorts of other things. I think there's more convenience created by the digital side. The problem is the real world side. And I think, Alan, you pointed this out. The challenge of infrastructure is much harder than the challenge of technology. It takes much longer to change. Regulators, except in the state of Florida, are that with the last name Brandeis, are not responsive to you know, shifting policy and regulation and infrastructure in order to adapt to a changing reality. I think that's the real challenge.
I'm going to throw this over to Alan for a second. I rode with Victor Calise, and Victor's has been the commissioner for disabled mobility for the city of New York for a while. And I went with Victor for a day from his apartment to get downtown to work. He's wheelchair bound, and he's one of those people that gets up in the morning and is just so excited about life. but go with him on his daily commute to get from one borough to the next to get downtown. And he's the commissioner for disabled mobility. And he's way past dial-a-ride. Like, he's using Uber. He's using Uber Access. And it sucks for him. And he has to be in New York because he's there to stand up for all the other people who are suffering from disadvantages in the city and trying to integrate in the economy. And so, like, I hear you that for the 40% that raised their hand, that you guys are all on the up and up. But really, honestly, for a guy like Victor, access is awful. So, Alan, are we succeeding? Is everything
No, of course we're not succeeding. I mean, I think part of our problem, and I know Victor, part of our problem is that we haven't talked to the communities that we might want to serve with this well enough. When we've decided what's the market that we're looking at, we look at ourselves. And my goodness, I guess I've written about Waymo in Chandler. Great. 70% of the households have 2 or more cars. Do you know how good you have to be to really get a customer there, to get them to say, oh, I'm going to leave my car at home and I'm going to use Waymo One? I mean, sure, as a Disneyland ride or, whatever, maybe, okay? But there are a lot of folks, a significant number, that, my goodness, they don't have all that we have. And if you want to talk about people who, my goodness, they really can't go anywhere, are the people that don't have cars. Now, whether or not they don't have cars because of a physical issue or an economic issue, which is the bigger one, my goodness, their opportunity set of what they can do to maybe lift themselves up out of where they are don't exist. And one of the failures, I think, of the driverless vehicle industry, and here we are talking about driverless, is that they really haven't gone and talked to those folks. You go down and talk to the public housing folks, go knock on their doors on there in Trenton. I mean, where would you like to go and how do you get there? To me, this is where the opportunity is to start, to really provide a sector of our economy, improve mobility, to improve their quality of life, get it to work there, and then come to me and say, if you can get me to get rid of the 4 cars that I own, or leave them all at home. I mean, if you're starting with me, how can you make money? I don't believe there's a business model there.
So panels are much more fun when there's strong disagreement. So I'm going to strongly disagree with you. I don't think that's a problem with autonomous vehicles at all. The problem with autonomous vehicles is they don't even work in Chandler, which has got wide roads and a consumer base that could potentially afford them and make the system viable. I don't think the challenges are necessarily around proving out an initial use case in Trenton, New Jersey, rather than Chandler, Arizona. I think the challenge is just getting it to work at all, and that's what's failed, right? I think you can adapt it and scale it across America and make an accessible service. And even more controversially, because this is going to be more fun, I think the part of the beauty of Uber's initial success, and Uber, I think, is interesting because they enable the trip economy. They've obviously got a bad reputation and there are lots of issues with the company, but they enable the trip economy. They started as a luxury service that appealed to people who could afford to own cars, but could also afford to cover the cost of labor. And I think if you want to transform the way Americans move, you can't start with the bottom. You have to start with the top and build a business that can then scale to everybody. Even Tesla has done that, right? Like, they started with the Model S and the Roadster and have scaled down. And I'm so glad to see how upset you are with what I'm saying.
Isn't it funny, though, when you look at it?
I want to jump in. I'm not going to let him off.
Because I'm going to disagree with both of you.
Wait, let me.
He says that, okay, I'll let you go, Alan, first.
Okay, he wants to start that way. I don't. I have enough. I can get enough. Enough things are being given to me. I think this is, I want to bring Silicon Valley to New Jersey because it's gotten too much into itself. I think we should look at places where, in fact, we can do some good to society, as opposed to, I need more.
Okay,
But-
so
but why?
Here,
but,
here. Wait, hold on a second. So I
why-
gotta get a word in.
We love
edgewise
each
here.
other, really.
We just a little bit of order in this disorderly motley group. So I got to throw in for the fact that you said you think that we are not serving the disadvantaged groups of people, the transportation deserts, and we need to do it. I think there's a strong galvanizing force around it. And then Olaf, you came in and you said the problem with Waymo 1 is that it doesn't work. And my issue actually is somewhere in between. Is I actually think it does work. I think the problem is really that we applied it in the wrong use case. I think if you drive around in a Mobileye-enabled Ford Fusion today or other things like that, self-driving a vehicle works. The problem is, I don't want to sit in the back of a car the way that a car was designed when all of this other capability is there for me as somebody that needs accessible mobility or all of the other food delivery or other services that I need, because a Chrysler minivan wasn't made for autonomous vehicle operations. It's a stupid vehicle for an autonomous vehicle, and nobody paid attention to it at the beginning. So Waymo 1 failed in two ways. It failed because the vehicles are way too expensive for somebody to buy, and second, they're the wrong vehicles. And so if I have to go to California one more time and hear the State House talk about the fact that they've issued over 50 licenses for autonomous vehicle companies, they haven't. They've issued 50 licenses for autonomous vehicle software companies to ride on crappy vehicles that don't deliver accessible mobility for people where autonomy could work the best. So for me, what really needs to happen is people need to build the damn vehicles that deliver the accessible mobility instead of crowing about the fact that they finally figured out for how autonomy can work. So that's my point.
Yeah, and we need the government to allow them to do that and say, oh my goodness, because you don't have this doodad and that doodad because it was needed in 1920 or something like that to move on.
Firstly, Waymo's moving across to the I-Paces. That's like the
great,
Jaguar
I-Paces.
I-Pace rather than
Even harder to get my head in the back when I'm 80 years old and I have trouble.
But I completely disagree. Like the problem is Waymo doesn't work, and the way it doesn't work that's problematic is that you cannot take the driver out. It rains for a few days in Chandler, and then they have to put a safety driver in because the reflections off the surface, right? Like they can't scale the service yet. And if they could scale the service, then it would be economically profitable and they could scale it to many other cities. It's a technology problem much more than it is a design of the vehicle. The design of vehicles will change the moment the technology works, but the technology is late according to the optimistic...
We've got a precious few minutes and we're throwing out some great
I
ideas.
just
Alan,
want to...
go ahead.
No, I mean, it's Silicon Valley that said that these things have to work 365.25 days a year. It's not the people who might want to use it. How about if it only worked 350? How about if it waited until somebody plowed the streets before it tried to go out in the snow? And who in the heck wants to drive in fog anyway? Really? We're solving the fog problem? We're solving the heavy snow problem? No, we're trying to provide mobility to people.
And it only rains in
Equitable
Chandler in
mobility,
August.
affordable mobility to people. Hey, you know, I think Waymo can work 350 days a year in Trenton, and they can deliver enormous value, and they'll make money because they'll be able to do it affordably, and the amount that we will have to add on top to make it really affordable will be so low that we'll throw money at them.
So here's a controversial idea to solve the challenges of Trenton and many other communities around America that are just closed out of car ownership, right? I'm going to say something really controversial now. The American system of car ownership is socialist in the sense, just like the education system is, in that everybody pays taxes in order to support the construction of roads. Everybody pays additional costs in their shopping or their doctor's visits or their school dues, etc., in order to pay for the parking spaces. But only the Americans that can afford to own cars benefit from these costs and investments, right? So that's the fundamental
Good socialist concept.
Your answer to this problem, right? That basically there's a whole class of Americans that are locked out of car ownership, and then they can't really escape it because there's no alternative to car ownership. If you live in one place that doesn't have accessibility to transit, which is most of America, you're just locked out. You can't get your kids to better schools. You can't find good work opportunities, and that's why I think the gaps in America are large and growing. Definitely a key factor.
Agreed.
So if that's the problem, part of your solution, the thing you've been pushing for on stage at least, has been autonomous vehicles as the way to reduce the labor costs, et cetera, et cetera. But maybe the solution, how do you respond to this, is to use the $12,000 that the Biden administration has decided to subsidize rich Americans to buy Teslas and Hummer EVs, these like giant, colossal battery sponges that are just sucking lithium ion into their bellies. Why is $12,000 going to that? 98%, 99% of US spending on infrastructure is going towards building more roads. And we're not building and supporting the one kind of mobility that can actually affordably change the lives of these people, which is subsidizing e-bikes and micromobility. $12,000, you can buy a lot of e-bikes for anybody. And some bike lanes in Trenton connecting it to Princeton, New Jersey, and other places around it, and then also supporting New Jersey Transit, because the problem with New Jersey Transit is density. Nobody uses it, and also density. Let's not get sidetracked by New Jersey Transit's issues, because you have strong views there. Why isn't that the solution? Isn't the solution just to build micromobility everywhere, micromobility lanes in everywhere, and get up to where Copenhagen is, where 49% of people commute by bicycle, rather than Seattle, which is the same profile of city, where 3% of people commute by bicycle?
Alan. I went to a thrift shop. I went to a thrift shop recently, and I bought a bicycle.
Another song you can do a cappella around.
I bought a bicycle at a thrift shop, brought it home, and my wife won't let me ride it because she's afraid that I will get killed. The micro-mobility for the 40% biased people that we have here, you said it was selection bias, is good and great, and do that. There are still a number of folks for which a scooter or an e-bike is really not for them. And my goodness, 350 days a year, maybe, I don't know. I mean, it does get a little chilly in New Jersey. And so yes.
But in Copenhagen, the number is 49%.
No, but for all those folks who can use that, absolutely. So it is a win-win. If we put in whatever we need to put in, the little infrastructure we might need to be able to do automated vehicles, driverless automated vehicles, to pick up people at kiosks and take them to a kiosk, make them walk just a little bit. It doesn't have to come to my side door. I mean, I'm not that required. Jeez. And be available, 24/7. And in fact, do that when you're doing that. Also, make it appropriate. Do all the things that were discussed here earlier with respect to micromobility. Absolutely, there are many solutions, opportunities out there. But I think the one opportunity, if we're going to do driverless, is the opportunity that we get to make it affordable. And we heard in the previous session, factor of 10 reduction in the cost. It's 40 cents a vehicle mile, something like that. It can be, because of course all the technology that goes into the various things. That's all Moore's law. It's going to zero with scale. Software, it goes. I mean, students copy it all the time. You can copy it for free. I mean, it goes to zero. My goodness, the driver does go to zero. It isn't zero today, but the Waymo driver, its cost goes to zero.
Okay.
You do good vehicles like you want to build on there, you provide, and it's not for everybody. But we should look at who in society could really be helped by this, and let's give them some help, because we have left them behind, and we've given them buses that operate on half-hour headways who go to.
But aren't we leaving them behind now by not building micromobility infrastructure? Like, isn't that?
So
I agree about autonomy.
What we've left you with today, since our esteemed EV panel stole 9 minutes of your break, we're going to go ahead and turn you over to your break. But what I want to say is I've been inspired. We've been inspired by the last 2 days. There are many challenges to solve. It is not all roses out there. There are forests about how you make money, and it's not in investing in the AV stack. There are accessible mobility challenges that need to be solved. There are regulatory challenges to stop putting $12,000 in the hands of the richest of America, but trying to get infrastructure and mobility available. And we're 3, you're 200, and we all need to go out and make these changes happen this year so that when we come back in 2022, we can actually see more return on the discussions that are here. So thank you, Olaf. Thank you, Alan. Thank you all.
And now for a rendition of Room Where It Happens.
That's exactly in the room where it happens. Later, next year.
Ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy a 15-minute break with the exhibitors. Breakout sessions will begin promptly at 10:45, and lunch will be served in this room after the breakout sessions. Enjoy your day.